Hey, this is Travis. We are still going down the DeFi learning journey here, specifically for UX designers. In the previous video, we talked about Compound, which is a lending platform for Web3 tokens. And now in this video, we're going to talk about something called liquidity mining. This is how DeFi protocols have chosen to solve the liquidity bootstrapping problem, and we're going to talk about it in this video. So liquidity mining is basically where a protocol mints their native token. In the DeFi case, they call them governance tokens, which I'll get into later. And so they mint these tokens, and then they, over time, they incrementally pay out the people who are supplying liquidity. They pay out this token as an additional reward. So in the case of Compound, I look at supplying Ether, you get 2.83%, and this is just the base for supplying Ether. This is what's paid from the people who are borrowing Ether. But there's a second interest rate called, or the comp interest rate, and this is distributed by the Compound protocol to all suppliers and all borrowers, actually. And it's this additional APY. So it's an additional yield for people supplying liquidity into Compound. And this is what Compound is trying to do, is to make it competitive and attractive to keep your liquidity on their platform, because there are other lending and borrowing platforms like Rari Capital and Aave. And so if users moved their liquidity to those platforms, then the user experience on Compound would get worse, because it's going to cost more for borrowers to borrow those tokens, because those tokens have become more scarce on Compound, or in other words, there's less liquidity in Compound. And this is just an example of how liquidity is important across all of DeFi. So as I said, what Compound has done, they have minted, I think, a total of 10 million comp tokens. This is what they're calling their governance token. And then what they do is they supply 0.5 comp token every Ethereum block to their various lending and borrowing pools. And see, it gets divided 50% to suppliers, 50% to borrowers. So this is an example of, you've got suppliers and borrowers. These are the users of the Compound protocol, and they're being rewarded in that protocol's comp token. Now, a bit of a digression here. This comp token is called the governance token, or it's an example of a governance token, because people who hold the comp token can vote on governance decisions and proposals for Compound. This can affect and influence how the Compound protocol changes over time, right? If they say that they want to add another lending pool, let's say for, I can't think of one right now, but they wanted to add another token to be able to be lent and borrowed, well, this would come down to a governance decision, and so the comp holders would ultimately decide whether or not that happened. Now, Compound started its liquidity mining program in June of 2020, and we see that the total value locked in Ethereum DeFi was about $1 billion, and this worked really well for Compound. It attracted a lot of liquidity into the platform, and so other DeFi protocols followed suit, and many of them started their own liquidity mining programs with using their native governance token as the reward. And this led to an explosion in DeFi called DeFi Summer. It attracted a lot more liquidity into the DeFi ecosystem. We see here it goes from $1 billion in 2020 to, and it just starts ratcheting it up from here, right? To 20 billion by the end of the year. And it's because like this additional liquidity just created a lot more yield in DeFi, and so it people rushed in with their tokens to earn these rewards. Let's just touch on this concept really quickly. Total value locked. This is often abbreviated as TVL. This is just a way to measure all of the token liquidity in a DeFi ecosystem or in a protocol, because we can see these individual protocols like MakerDAO has its own TVL of about $10 billion. But thinking about TVL in terms of a DeFi ecosystem, it could be the tokens locked in DEX liquidity pools. Like in the example in the first video, we showed adding liquidity to a Uniswap DEX pool or a liquidity pool. So that's one example. Depositing Ether into Maker vaults or any other collateral, that's the total value locked in MakerDAO, for example. And then other things too, other staking pools and lending and borrowing platforms. It's just the idea is how much token liquidity is in that DeFi ecosystem. And it's a good way to compare the health of a DeFi ecosystem. So we can say that Ethereum has more liquidity locked than something like Solana. I think I can go to overview here, or maybe chains. And we can see that Ethereum has 50.1 billion of liquidity, and something like, Solana has only 3.1 billion. So we can say that Ethereum is by far the biggest platform in terms of liquidity. They have the majority of DeFi liquidity on Ethereum DeFi protocols. So far, we've talked about several ways to earn yield on your crypto in DeFi. You can become a liquidity provider on a DEX like Uniswap. You can lend your crypto on a platform like Compound, and you can also take part in these liquidity mining programs that pop up on different protocols in the DeFi ecosystem. In the next video, we're going to talk about another yield activity called staking, and then talk about something called yield farming, where people stack different yield activities on top of each other. Maybe they become a liquidity provider and then stake their liquidity provider token in another pool to earn additional rewards. So yield farming is just the idea of stacking different yield activities to earn more rewards. We'll talk about it in the next video. Thank you all so much.